What's going on, YouTube? Dave here with the Das Lamas YouTube channel. Right there. If you got the last video, we had just done the Teraflex big brake upgrade kit up front. This video, we're actually going to do the rear brakes. So I've already gotten the Jeep up, I got the wheels off, and we're pretty much ready to go. Let's take a look at what we got. Alrighty, so what we got here are the new rotors. The factory ones are something like 11.2 inches or something like that. These new ones for the rear are 11.5 inches, or sorry, 13.5 inches in diameter. They're a huge increase. We got some thread locker to lock some of the bolts back in. We got some brake grease for the pads to go in the sliders. We got the Teraflex caliper relocation mounting brackets. This is what's going to allow us to put the caliper further out from the center, from the axle, to fit and clear the new rotors. And then we went with some Hawk brake pads. Bungee cord to hang up the caliper out of the way so you don't hang it from the brake line. That's pretty much what we're going to need. And tools. Again, sorry about the mess in the garage. I got to get this thing cleaned up. Kids got new squirt guns and all that stuff. It's a little chilly right now. I got the heater going. But anyways, let's get to this install. So the part that we need to keep is the caliper itself. We are going to replace the caliper mount hardware here. So let's take the caliper off first and then get that hung out of the way. So using a 13mm socket, you can do it with a wrench as well, but we are going to take the caliper bolts off. 15mm wrench to hang on to the back side of this bolt. So 15mm. It's going to have to be a little bit narrower here, otherwise it's not going to fit in. So those of you that bash on Harbor Freight tools, hey, the thinner wrench head came in handy here. So we're going to take off the top and the bottom. Alrighty, now that we got these caliper bolts off, let's see if we can just get this caliper out. So, bumping my light here, sorry about that, guys. We got the caliper out here. You don't want to hang the caliper by the brake line, so get yourself a bungee cord, coat hanger, something like that, and get this all hung up. So there's plenty of, sorry, we'll go the other way. There's plenty of brake line slack still going on here. So just got the bungee cord hooked off to the frame right here. Next thing that we need to do is take the caliper mounting bracket off. We are going to be reusing some of the hardware here. So the slider pins, we're going to be reusing all that. Reusing the bolts here that we took out of the slider pins, reusing these mounting bolts. We're just replacing this whole bracket. Alrighty, to get these nuts, these bigger ones off, it's an 18mm wrench. These guys are going to be on there like pretty hard. So get a breaker bar or something like that. I'm kind of ghetto here, so I'm going to see if I can just put two wrenches together to pop this off, and hopefully I don't punch myself in the face or anything worse than that. Okay, so that one's broken loose. Get this bottom one back on here. There we go. Got those all loosened up, and we'll just get these things unscrewed here real quick. Other than the guide pins, we are not reusing this bracket. We are reusing the bolts that I'm taking out right now though. There you go. So the two bolts are off. Not reusing this bracket, but we are going to be reusing these guide pins. So, sorry about the bad lighting here. That's the only place I can stick my light. If this is the first time that you've taken your rear rotors off, they do have these little retaining washers on there. So you're going to want to get something to just grab those and you're going to want to clip them off of there. We will not be reusing these guys, so you can just cut them, whatever you can do to get those off. So do that for all 5. All right guys, so I did have to use a little bit of penetrating oil on that, and then just tap the back side of the rotor with a hammer to get it pulled forward. There's the old rotor. Here's the new rotor. I'm just setting it on top there. Let's see if I can line it up on the bottom edge. Lined up on the bottom edge, and there you go. You can see 2 of my finger widths taller. So definitely going with bigger rotor, and then it's got a lot of these cooling fins on there to help with cooling. It's got so many holes because it's set up for 5x5 and 5x5.5, so it's multi-use rotor. But we got the rotor off. I'm going to hit this with a wire brush just to clean off a little bit of the rust, and then we'll get this new rotor installed. So let's just clean off a little bit of this rust here. So now that that's all cleaned up, let's get our new rotor in here. Slides on easy as that. Kind of wish that these were vented here, but I think if they're vented, they end up having to be wider. Then you have to do a whole new caliper and stuff like that. So hoping that this is enough to dissipate some of the heat. So this is our factory mounting bracket. We need to pull a few things off here. So we are going to pull off the guide pins. Set those aside, don't get those dirty. And no, those just pull straight out. So if you grab them, pull straight out, they pop right off. We do not need the pads. We have new pads that we're going to be installing. So let's get these pads off of here. The other thing that we do need are going to be these clips. So sorry, that was off camera. So those 4 clips. Other than that, we don't need anything else here. Alrighty, so now we have the new bracket. We are going to take our guide pins, and it already looks pretty greasy, but we're going to go ahead and add some more. So it's not going to hurt anything to have a little bit more grease. So we'll get some more of that grease on there. One, 2, okay. Got a bunch of that grease there. And it's just a matter of taking these pins and putting them in there. And you press it in and that rubber boot goes on. So again, there's the pin. And I'm just twirling it just to spread the grease out a little bit. And then when you press down, that boot goes over. So there's those right there. Next thing we need to do is get the anti-rattle clips installed. So the ones that we took out of the old bracket will go on the new one. I'm actually going to grease these as well, so I'm going to put a little grease on the inside of these, and then I'm actually going to put some grease on the inside of those brackets as well. Well, I'm going to put the grease on the tabs of the brake pad that go into that bracket. But for right now, I'm just going to take a little bit of grease here, squeeze it out on my finger, and then for our bracket, let's see if I can get this to where you guys can see me doing it. For a bracket, I'm just going to wipe a little in there. And just putting a little bit of this on here will help with some squeaking brakes later on. Some people do this, some people don't. I prefer to do it, I always have. So we'll do that to all the sides, and then we'll get this mounted up. Alrighty, so with the mounting bolts that go and mount that bracket back onto the wheel here, we're going to use some Loctite on here. I'm using blue. Some people choose to use red. Some people use none. Up to you. I believe in the Teraflex videos and stuff like that, they actually use red, but I'll just put a little strip of blue, a dollop of blue on here. And then now we can take our bracket. Let's see if I can do this through the camera. I doubt I can. So we are going to get these mounted on, thread them by hand, and then get them with an 18mm socket to tighten them down, and then we will get them torqued down afterwards. And that bottom one I can't get a socket into, so it's my box wrench. There you go, we got this bracket back in there. So, I have my Hawk brake pads. When you're installing these brake pads, they both look just about the same, but you notice one of them has this little metal tab, the other one doesn't. This little metal tab is actually your squeal pad. This is what your rotor will rub against and start squealing to indicate that it is wearing down. It doesn't really matter if you do inside or outside, it'll still function, but typically you want to have the one that's in the rear, on the inside part of the caliper, with the squeal pad. This is the one that the caliper piston is usually pressing against, and this pad tends to wear a little bit faster than the one that's on the outside. So you want this one on the inside. I'm going to get a little bit of grease, and I'm going to grease up the tabs here. Again, we're doing this stuff to prevent any sort of squeaking or anything like that in the brake pads when we're done. Don't necessarily need to go crazy with it, but we'll smear some around there. And you don't want to put it on the face of the pad. Try to avoid that. But we're just going to put it all on the faces of this little tab, the part that's going to sit inside those anti-rattle clips or retainer clips or whatever it is that you want to call them. So we're going to go and place these pads in the rear. So those are in. Now to get the ones on the front side put in as well. Okay, so I've already greased up the tabs on this pad. On the front you got this bridge piece that you need to work around. So get it in there, work past the bridge, and then we got the pads in there. Pads are installed. Alrighty, I normally do with this C-clamp, but the C-clamp that I have is too small to fit over the whole caliper. So I went out and bought a compressor, which I do enough of these that I should probably just have one around anyway. But you're going to take this compressor, put it all the way up against the outside of the caliper. You're going to take one of the old pads, you're going to stick it in smooth side against the piston, and then basically you're going to screw this in. And when you screw it in, I do this without sliding it all over, guys, sorry. You want to kind of keep it centered on that piston. But as you screw this in, it's pressing down on the pad, which is compressing this piston. Let's see if I can get this so you can see it in the light. So right there you can see the piston screwing down. Alright, so you also want to check your fluid reservoir up front to make sure that it's not overflowing as you compress this piston. And there you go, your piston's compressed. You can loosen the tools up, take the brake pad out, and you can see your surface is flat. Now that we got the piston for the caliper pressed, we can take these screws out. I'm gonna take that caliper off from right off camera here, and then I'm going to slide them over the brake pads. As you slide them over the brake pads, these guide pins, you're going to have to press them in to allow the caliper to slide all the way into it. Once you get the caliper placed all the way in, and screw these guys in too. You can always put a little bit of thread locker on these pins as well. You don't want them backing out, so do a little bit of thread locker on this guy right here. And then I'll grab this one up here and I'll throw a little thread locker on that one too. Just a little dab. All right, and then get your 15 millimeter, and you can set that on the inside there. Adjust the camera here so you guys can see it. 15 millimeter on that inside nut, and what was it, an 18? No, it's got all my tools out here. Can't remember which one's which. It's gonna be a 13 millimeter to tighten this down. And do the same for the bottom. Tool got stuck in there. And that's pretty much all you need. Throw the wheel back on, torque everything down, and the install's done. We got to get the brakes, the pads seated to the new rotors as well. But that's essentially the install. All right, so it's been about 5 days since we've finished the install and everything like that. If I had done just the rear brakes and the rear rotors, I don't think I would have noticed that much of a difference. Most of the stopping power definitely comes from the front. Everybody knows that. That's where the bigger brakes are. That's where the weight of the vehicle is. You know, normally vehicles are about 60% braking the front, 40% in the rear. It really depends. But the rear brake kit was simple to install. I needed new brakes anyway, new pads anyway. The install went very well, and you know, I can't complain. Overall, the entire system, the front and rear, big brake kit from Teraflex, it's definitely a big improvement. Definitely a big improvement. I can hit the brakes and, you know, lock up all 4 tires. The stopping power is there when you need it. I haven't tried it with our trailer yet, but once we get the trailer on, I don't foresee any issues with that. And even when you're just driving around normally, the stopping isn't so excessive to where it's throwing you through the dash every time you hit the brakes. It still drives normal. you just have that added stopping power when you need it. So, you know, if this is something that you're looking into doing, hopefully my videos were able to help you get this project done. If you are on the fence on whether or not you want to do this, I definitely recommend it, especially if you're just going with a bigger wheel, bigger tires, like 35-inch, 37-inch. It's not necessarily the total weight of the vehicle, not necessarily the trailer. It's just when you're going with bigger tires, you have more rotational mass and you're going to need bigger brakes to stop the vehicle. For me, it was all the categories above. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. Like, subscribe if you haven't done so. I'll check you out on the next one. Off camera, just a little bit right there. That's the next project that I'm just about to install. So stay tuned for that video. Take care.